Story 1. This is the best revenge story I've had so far, and it's quite a long one, but I just had to share it. I'm a South African living in Japan, and I took my Japanese wife to meet my parents and have a honeymoon in South Africa. After our trip, we had 3 flights back to Japan. The first leg was from Johannesburg to Qatar. We boarded, got settled in, and I immediately noticed that many of the passengers around us were wearing the same t-shirts, likely employees of some pharmaceutical company. As soon as we got settled, I noticed a woman and 2 men sitting behind us who were also part of this group. The woman, let's call her Brandy, was quite chatty, loud, and a bit obnoxious. But being a nervous flyer, I was more focused on the takeoff than her. So, I put in my earpods and tuned into some music. Whoosh, we take off on our 8-hour flight to Qatar. As soon as the seatbelt sign switched off, Brandy started ordering brandy and cokes for herself and her 2 coworkers. With each drink, her voice grew louder and more obnoxious. By drink number 6, the topic of her conversation shifted to relationships. At this point, half the cabin could hear her conversation about how she disapproved of interracial relationships. I could hear her through the guttural screams and face-melting guitar riffs of Meshuggah blasting through my earpods. Then it happened. A woman sitting 4 seats to her left said quite loudly, "Man, could you please quiet down? You're a bit loud, and I'm trying to get some sleep." I paused my music and took out my left earpod to eagerly eavesdrop. Brandy wasn't happy. She responded, "Excuse me, this isn't a nighttime flight. Haven't you heard of earplugs?" and jumped straight back into her conversation. The tension in the air was palpable. In that moment, all the passengers who had heard the interaction exchanged looks, and we all knew this flight was about to get interesting. About 20 minutes later, a flight attendant politely asked Brandy to quiet down a bit. She begrudgingly agreed, ordered another round, and quieted down. But it didn't last long. Within 30 minutes, Brandy's volume was back up to a level louder than the jet engines outside the windows. Then, another woman from the other side of the cabin, a Chinese woman, walked over to where Brandy was sitting and, in her best attempt at English, said, "Please be quiet, my child keeps waking up because of you." Brandy looked up and, I kid you not, asked the Chinese woman in very mispronounced Chinese, "Can you speak Chinese?" I'm fluent in Chinese, so I understood what she was trying to say. She kept repeating it until the frustrated Chinese woman went back to her seat. By this time, both flight attendants in our cabin were well aware of Brandy's sassy nature and decided to close the bar for the entire cabin, which ticked me off because I was hoping to enjoy a few more whiskeys before we landed. A few minutes later, I heard shuffling, followed by plastic sounds, and then the faint noise of a bottle cap being cracked open. Sure enough, Brandy had opened her duty-free bottle of brandy she bought at the airport. Once again, their conversation started to crescendo. At this point, I realized I had been too focused on Brandy to notice my wife. I glanced over at her and saw that she had pulled one of her earpods out, trying to get a look at Brandy through the crack in the seat. She then turned to me with a face I rarely see, a face of pure rage and frustration. That's when I snapped. Normally, I'm not the kind of person who likes to cause a scene, but I decided I wasn't going to let this woman ruin my wife's flight. So, like a crazy person, I stood up and announced loudly enough that the entire cabin turned to listen. "Excuse me, everybody. Can I please have your attention? By show of hands, who of you would like these people to shut the heck up?" About 30 passengers raised their hands. I then turned to Brandy and pointed at her, saying, "Look, understand? Shut up." I sat back down to the sound of applause from the passengers who had raised their hands. My wife was shocked by what I did, but I told her I did it because I could see Brandy was beginning to bother her too. She gave me a hug, and the flight attendant, who saw what I did, brought me a cup of Coke, but slipped me 2 little bottles of whiskey. Thankfully, Brandy and her gang passed out and were quiet for the rest of the flight, so my wife and I could finally relax. But Brandy wasn't finished. She had a new target, me. As we descended, Brandy woke up and decided she wanted to play some card games on the entertainment screen attached to the back of my seat, trying her best to hit the buttons hard enough to make my seat move. I teach kids for a living, so I recognize her behavior. It was like an angry toddler trying to get a rise out of me. I ignored her. We landed, the plane taxied off the runway, and everyone began getting up to leave. As soon as I stood up and Brandy saw my wife and me, she started repeatedly insulting me about my weight and how I married an Asian woman because I couldn't get a real South African woman. High school bully level insults. I just smiled and nodded, letting her say whatever she wanted, and then exited the plane. Finally, Brandy and her coworkers walked off the plane, and my wife and I found a nice cafe to relax and stretch before heading to our next gate for the second flight to Malaysia. When we finally got to the gate, guess who was also flying to Malaysia? That's right, Brandy. She was standing by the gate window, taking selfies, unaware of my presence. I found an empty seat next to a guy wearing the same pharmaceutical company t-shirt and said, "Excuse me, sir, that woman over there with blonde hair taking selfies, what's her name?" He asked why I wanted to know, and I told him she looked like someone I used to go to high school with. But I wasn't sure and didn't want to make a fool of myself by asking her directly. He told me her name, and I said, "Oh, then it's not her, sorry." I thanked him, and for the remainder of our wait at the gate, I logged into the airport Wi-Fi, found the company's Facebook page and website, and sent a detailed message recounting Brandy's behavior, making sure to include all the colorful things she had said with her coworkers. The next 2 flights back to Japan were uneventful, and we got home safe and sound. 2 weeks later, I received a reply from the CEO, asking for my number so he could talk to me about what happened. He called me and profusely apologized for Brandy's actions. Turns out, by the time Brandy landed in Malaysia, the CEO had already seen my message, changed her return flight back to South Africa for the very next day, and fired her at arrivals when she got back to Johannesburg. To celebrate, I bought a bottle of brandy and Coke on my way home from work that day to share with my lovely wife. Story 2. For over 20 years, I have hosted holidays at my house. My sister and her family moved out of state, but they're close enough to come back for each holiday. Sounds great, right? Well, not so much. My sister and her family always go to her in-law's place for the big meal, and since her mother-in-law isn't the best cook, they just pick at the food before invading my place for leftovers, or rather, the entire meal afterward. Now, you're probably thinking, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that it's gotten to the point where my recipe for mashed potatoes starts with a 10-pound bag of potatoes. The turkey barely fits in the oven. The sides take up the entire counter, and I use an entire quart of cream just for the desserts. It's a huge undertaking, and not only does my sister not contribute financially, but she never even has the decency to let me know whether they're coming or when. This year, I texted the family to let them know that my kids were going to make the meal for just us, and if anyone wanted to join us afterward, I'd have dessert and only dessert to share. As usual, I got texts from everyone else, but nothing from my sister. Rather than chase her down, I assumed she had received the message and moved on with my plans. The time came, and the kids put on a lovely meal. We ate, enjoyed ourselves, and then packed up the leftovers. A few family members showed up over the next hour, and we chatted happily. Then it happened. The cars pulling into the driveway. My sister's family had arrived. They invaded in their usual style, quick hugs all around before heading straight for the kitchen. It took less than 30 seconds before she was out trying to be polite since there were still others there to ask where the food was. Me. Aren't the pies on the counter? The bread pudding is in the crock pot, and the sauce is on the stove. Her. Yes, but where's the food? At this point, the others were starting to catch on to what was happening, trading glances. Me. I told everyone that we were only doing dessert. Did you not get the message? Her. You know we can't actually eat at mother-in-law's house. We were counting on eating here before we drive back. Me. Well, I think there should be fast food open somewhere between here and your place. Her adult kids were trickling out of the kitchen at this point, looking around as if they expected a turkey dinner to magically appear out of thin air, and everyone else was practically holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen. She made some unkind comments about how they were probably not going to find anything open and that it was my fault they were going hungry. She then told her kids to grab something to eat in the cars and stomped out. I'm not sure who lost their composure first, but I think it was my uncle who cracked and started laughing. Once we all calmed down, the rest of us had a lovely evening enjoying just desserts. Story 3. Years ago, my mom and I moved to a new dog-friendly apartment complex. We were excited because we had 2 dogs, and the community dog park was right next to our building. The apartments were full of dog owners with a wide range of dogs, from small to large, and our apartment was in a nice, quiet corner on the first floor. It was a peaceful, private area for us. One of our dogs was a terrier, so he could be a bit barky when we weren't home. However, when we were home, we had a clicker that he was trained to respond to, which helped us get him to stop barking and come to us. Since my mom worked in the afternoon and I worked in the mornings, our dog was usually alone for a few hours during the day. After about a month in our new apartment, we received a note from one of our neighbors. It was a complaint about our dog's barking. The note said, "Dear neighbor, I understand that you are new to this complex, but it is rude to allow your dog to bark. It is ruining my sleep before I go to work, and my job is extremely important. I don't care how you do it, but shut your dog up." My mom didn't know how to handle it, so she turned the note into the leasing office. The office reassured us not to worry, explaining that the neighbor had made similar complaints to other dog owners in the building. However, they did suggest we find ways to help calm our dog down when we weren't home. So, we did some research. We discovered that kids in the neighborhood liked playing around the power station outside our apartment, which seemed to be the source of our dog's barking. We blocked off that area when we were gone, and also started playing calming music for our dog. A week later, we got another knock on our door. This time, it was our angry neighbor again. He was upset, claiming that our dog had kept him up every night, barking for hours. I explained that our dog had been calm that day, and my mom had been home to monitor him. But the neighbor was adamant, saying, "I know what I heard. If you can't control your dog, I'm going to call animal control and have them taken from you. I've done it before, and I can do it again. Then I'll get you kicked out because I'm very rich, and the apartment needs my money. Do something to shut your dogs up, or else." After that, my mom apologized, and we went back inside. I later found out from another neighbor that this man had gone to 3 other apartments and made similar threats. My mom, feeling anxious, reported the incident to the leasing office. They told us not to worry, and if he made further threats, we should contact them. We also learned that the office had offered him a different apartment away from the dogs, but he had declined, saying the problem wasn't with the apartment, it was the dogs. My mom's anxiety continued to build, and she ended up buying a lemon spray bark collar for our dog, which I didn't agree with, but it gave her some peace of mind. We only used it when neither of us was home. Then, a month later, we got another knock this time. It was animal control. They had received an anonymous report about dog abuse and neglect. The AC officer came in, and my mom explained everything. The officer noticed how happy and playful our dogs were and figured it was a false call. The officer mentioned that there had been other similar calls from this same anonymous neighbor about other tenants. Afterward, the officer advised us to get any future threats on record if they occurred again. This constant stress started to take its toll on my mom, who was now afraid to leave the house, worried that animal control would take our dogs away. I'm usually the calm one in the family, but this neighbor's actions had clearly hurt us. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I researched local laws and leasing terms and made a plan. One weekend, while my mom was visiting my aunt out of state, I put my plan into action. I sat outside with my phone and a speaker and played a video of a dog barking loudly. I knew which apartment was the neighbor's thanks to other tenants who had also been harassed. I waited patiently, and when he stormed out, I stopped the video and started recording. His face was red with anger as he approached me. I greeted him with a smile and said, "I'm sorry, can I help you?" He immediately started shouting, "Screw you. I told you what I would do to your family if you didn't stop your mutt from ruining my sleep. Now, I'm going to get them taken from you and get you kicked out. I gave you a freaking chance. I hope they kill your dogs and you and your mom end up living in a cardboard box." I calmly responded, "So, you're saying that I'm not allowed to make loud noises, including my dog barking, between the hours of 7 a.m. and 11 p.m., and that I've broken the law by doing so?" He arrogantly replied, "You know you did. And you're telling me this from my porch at 2 p.m. in the afternoon?" He scoffed, "This won't be your porch once I tell the leasing office." I smiled and asked him to sit down. I had a few things to show him. I pulled out a printout of the county's noise ordinance laws, which stated that a dog's bark is considered equivalent to a loud appliance and is permissible between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. Before he could respond, I showed him another paper, the apartment's lease terms, which prohibit threats to other tenants. I then pulled out a final document showing that threatening another tenant or their property, including outdoor areas, is a lease violation that could lead to immediate eviction. The look on his face turned from anger to fear as he processed what I had just shown him. I quietly walked back into my apartment, leaving him standing there. Afterward, I contacted the leasing office and explained what had happened, offering them the recording of our conversation. A week later, my mom came home with the news. The neighbor had been evicted and was leaving later that week. Other tenants had come forward to confirm his harassment. From that point on, we never received another complaint. I even threw away the lemon spray collar. While my mom still gets anxious at times, she's been getting help, and I feel relief knowing that we stood up for ourselves. I don't regret what I did. I just wish it hadn't come to that. Story 4. I work as a cake decorator at my local grocery store, and it's usually a fun job, even though it gets hectic sometimes. The store is in a small town, so I don't usually have to deal with the difficult customers you often find in larger cities. But with the town growing, more new people are coming in, and our store has become known as the best place to get a cake. I've worked hard over the years to build that reputation, and it's rare for me to get complaints about my cakes. But this encounter stuck out, especially because I have no patience for rude or insulting customers. So, I'm at my station one day, preparing cakes when a guy, let's call him Dave, comes up to have me personalize a cake. He picks one out and hands it to me to add some custom writing. I write it in my usual stylized cursive, which always looks great. I finish the cake, leave it on the counter for him to pick up, and go back to my work. But then I see him walking back to the counter. I ask if there's a problem, and he says that no one can read what it says, and that it looks bad, which it didn't. He demands that I rewrite it. I calmly explain that I'll need to scrape the top of the cake, which will damage it, and I was about to tell him it would take a couple of minutes to fix. But he cuts me off, saying he doesn't want the cake anymore and will pick another one. I roll my eyes internally, but ask him which cake he wants. He hands me a second one, and I plan to write on it in a very legible print font. But before I can start, he says, "And get me someone who can spell." At this point, my patience is completely gone. I tell him to go to the front and ask for our assistant store leader, Antoinette, who can help him. A while later, Donna, our front-end manager, comes over to help. Donna isn't a cake decorator, but at that point, I wasn't going to get my other helper involved because of one rude customer. Donna is slower at writing on cakes, so I figured I'd waste a bit of his time. Donna writes the message, and Dave heads off again. But a few minutes later, Donna comes back, holding the cake with the best irony I could have asked for. One of the words was misspelled. So now Dave is complaining again, demanding the cake be fixed. We do our best to remove the misspelled word, but as I explained earlier, this always leaves some residue on the top of the cake that can't be cleaned off without re-icing it. Sure enough, the residue didn't come off, and now he doesn't want the cake anymore. He goes to complain to Antoinette. Antoinette starts trying to dab at the cake with a paper towel, but when she realizes it's not going to come off, She tells Dave that either he can take the cake with the minor blemish or pick a new one. She doesn't offer him a discount, as this whole issue was his fault. He dismissed my work without letting me fix it first, so technically, no one did anything wrong. Fallout: Dave storms off with a third cake, not personalized, muttering furiously to himself. No one got in trouble because it was obvious to everyone that Dave was being unreasonable. I later fixed the cakes he'd had us mess up and returned them to the case. I didn't catch exactly what he was saying, but I knew this. He spent 15 minutes trying to bully us into giving him the perfect cake, only to walk away with nothing but a face full of karma. And it was entirely his fault. Story 5. This is a story about how my friend's missing cat, Mavis, was rescued in a rather unconventional way from a group of overzealous animal activists, and how it led to a chain of events that turned the tables on them. In our country, there is a group called the OA, let's call them the organization, which enforces strict rules regarding pets. They have a policy that says outdoor pets are considered strays, no matter whether they have collars or microchips. The rules are not recognized by law, but the OA acts like the animal police, intervening in cases they deem necessary, even though they don't have legal authority. The real police don't usually bother unless something severe happens. The OA members, who are often very vocal on social media, present themselves as parents, feeders, and rescuers who are constantly complaining about how evil human beings are and the struggles they face. One day, my friend's cat, Mavis, a beautiful black Maine Coon mix, escaped from a broken mesh and went missing for 2 weeks. My friend did everything she could to find Mavis. She put up posters, posted on social media, and searched everywhere she could. Eventually, someone contacted her, saying they had seen Mavis' photo on an OA page where rescued cats were being listed for adoption. My friend immediately tried to contact the OA, but they refused to return Mavis to her, claiming she had been a bad owner for allowing Mavis to roam outdoors. They blocked her after that. My friend tried calling the police, but as expected, nothing much came of it. She would either be ignored or have to wait months for any real action. This is when I decided to take matters into my own hands, while my friend continued trying to get help from social media and other animal organizations. I figured that since the OA would now be screening Mavis adopters carefully, I could use this to my advantage. I contacted the OA and expressed interest in adopting another cat, Sunday, a one-eyed cat they were trying to rehome. They were excited because one-eyed cats are harder to adopt. We exchanged multiple messages and phone calls, discussing Sunday's health, personality, the preparations I would need to make, and all sorts of details like a serious adopter would. Finally, after 2 days, I requested to visit Sunday, and they gave me the address of the fosterer. When I arrived, sure enough, Sunday was caged right next to Mavis. It was almost too easy. I asked for a moment alone with Sunday, and while the fosterer wasn't looking, I grabbed Mavis and left. I felt bad for Sunday, but my mission was to get Mavis back with her rightful owner. I blocked all OA contacts and my friend and Mavis were reunited. All the information I had given was fake, and they wouldn't be able to track me down without involving the police, which I hoped would still be useless. My friend had all the evidence showing that Mavis was simply being returned to her, so there was no risk. My only regret was leaving Sunday behind with false hope, but I had no intention of adopting her. The next day, I received information that OA had microchipped Mavis after rescuing her. The cat wasn't microchipped when she escaped. She had a collar with her name on it, but the OA decided to microchip her anyway and gave her a new name, Moon. They even posted a sob story on social media, claiming that Mavis had been abused and abandoned, and that I had stolen her. This made me and my friend think, who gave them the right to microchip someone else's cat? The story grew more elaborate as OA posted on social media, claiming Mavis was being bred illegally to sell kittens, and that she had been scheduled for spaying before being stolen. This wasn't true. Mavis had been spayed years ago. We managed to find old pictures of Mavis from when she was a kitten, showing her sterilization scar, and used that evidence to debunk their claims. With some help from people on social media, we exposed the truth, and OA's narrative quickly crumbled. It was incredibly satisfying to watch the OA members complain about how everyone was being mean to them while they were just trying to save the world. In the end, Sunday found a new home, and it seems like she's adjusting well. I finally stopped feeling guilty for leaving her behind. She deserved much more, and thankfully, she got it. The OA was exposed for their overreach, and Mavis was finally back with her owner. Story 6. I had a coworker who would often play Spanish music in the back of the house. But not just any Spanish music, I'm talking about the raunchiest trap music you could imagine. Think Bad Bunny, Karol G, El Alfa songs that could definitely raise some eyebrows. Even some of the merengue and bachata hits had lyrics that seemed pretty intense for adults. Some people would ignore the music, but then there were others who were curious and wanted to know what it meant. The thing is, my Latina coworker didn't speak much English, so she wasn't able to explain the lyrics, and they'd turn to me for help. I usually just told them, it's just a bunch of nonsense. The songs are made to make you want to dance, which would usually get them to leave me alone. Except for this one nosy coworker. She was dead set on understanding what one particular song meant. When I gave my usual explanation, she wasn't satisfied. She insisted on knowing what Mesa que Masa Plata was about and why the singer kept saying, socks, socks, socks. I told her that, as Latinos, we don't really dig deep into the lyrics, but since she wanted to know, I told her the guy wasn't saying, socks, socks, socks. He was actually saying, za za za, which means absolutely nothing. And when he sings, La Mesa que Masa Plata la Mando a la Niña, he's basically saying that the table that claps the loudest gets the girl. She looked pretty uncomfortable, but since she wanted to know so much, I decided to keep going. I told her that this kind of song is played at strip clubs, birthday parties, weddings, quinceañeras, communions, basically at any kind of celebration. I spent the rest of the shift explaining every song, making her more and more uncomfortable. El Venao is about a guy gaslighting his girlfriend after she hears rumors about him being a player. Obsession is about a guy obsessing over a girl who doesn't want him and him trying to convince her to leave her man for him. 4K is a super raunchy song about, well, you get the picture, giving it to women like they're porn stars. By the time I left, she looked like she could have lived the rest of her life without knowing any of that. I can't wait to see her reaction when I tell her what Delinquente is about tomorrow. I bet she'll be clutching her pearls. Story 7. So I used to work third shift at a carpet warehouse in northwest Georgia. This area is known as the carpet capital of the world. I worked as a lift truck driver at a distribution center. Our main job was to receive rolls of carpet from the manufacturing side, cut them down to order lengths and ship them back out or put them back in the warehouse. The company had an expected production rate of 350 rolls counted over the course of a night. As long as you met production, there was no issue. If you worked at a consistent rate without overloading and had no issues, you could make 425 rolls. Occasionally, you did have issues actually finding the particular order in a warehouse with 1,000s of carpet rolls. The company system had a computer system that told you what roll to get next and where to take it. If you happened to not scan a roll within 15 minutes, it would send an alert to the supervisors, who would then get on a golf cart to go looking for you. On to the story. I was consistently pulling 400+ rolls per night as I would take short breaks as I was never hungry and would get sleepy. After about a year of this, 10 minutes before break, I was having trouble finding a roll. As soon as the break hit, I stopped looking and went to break. This would easily take about 10 minutes just to get there. Once break was done, I was back to looking for my roll. By this point, I had another 10 minutes to find it. This was added to the 10 minutes before break that I could find it by the time I was pulling my roll off the bin. The manager had shown up in his golf cart. He just gave me a death stare and took off. By the time I took it to the central location, my boss was waiting there with a write-up in hand. He asked me to get off my lift truck and follow him to the office. He told me that this was because I took more than 15 minutes to pull a roll and didn't skip it. This was a slap in the face as far as I was concerned. From that point on, I never ever did more than a few more rolls than the required production rate. I would carry a clipboard and count my tally for the night. About a month or so of my not exceeding my production, I got called up to the office one night, and this is how the conversation went. "Hey boss, what's up? Come in, take a seat." "I'm fine standing. What's up?" "Come on in, take a seat." "Is something going on? I need to get back to getting my night's production." "Well, don't worry about that. We won't count today against you." "Okay, what's up?" "Is everything okay? Are you doing all right at home?" Me, visually confused. "I'm fine. What is this about?" "I'm not just a boss, we are a family, and it's my responsibility as a boss to make sure that everyone is okay. The reason I called you up is because you have had a sudden drop in production about a month ago, and we were wondering if you had some family issues going on." "Nope. My production is where the company expects it to be. I'm not saying that it's not. You were one of the few employees that could get 400+ rolls a night, and now you are barely getting production. But it's 350, right? Yes, you are meeting production, but you would do 400+ rolls a night, and as a team, your additional rolls would help out your other team members who were struggling." "Wait, you were using my roll count to go towards someone else. Why was I never given part of their paycheck?" "That's not how this goes. We are a team, and we have a collective production rate that is a team requirement." I give an internal sigh at this nonsense. We have some teammates who have slower equipment or have trouble with hand-eye coordination, and your additional rolls would help them with their roll count go towards the collective department production rate. "Okay, so what do you want me to do about it?" "As far as I'm concerned, the company requires 350, and that is what I am doing, right? Can you tell me why is it that you dropped all of a sudden?" "Fine. Let me take a seat." I pulled out my wallet and started to pull out the signed write-up that he gave me a month ago. I slid it over to him. My plan was coming to fruition, as I somehow felt that this moment would come somehow. "What's this?" "This is a write-up that you gave me a month ago. Do you remember?" That night I had already met my 350 production requirement. I was stuck on a roll 10 minutes before break, and took another 10-12 minutes after break. That night I already had my 350 rolls. Do you remember? I was met with a surprised Pikachu face. After you wrote me up that night when I already had more than my expected production. Why would I ever want to give you more than I have to? Do you really not remember this? It's a good thing that I held on to this, huh? After about 10 minutes of silence. "Will that be it? Can I go back to doing my work?" Yeah, go ahead." And yeah, that was it. He never opened his mouth with me after this.